There is one idea we've always known, and yet it keeps surprising us.
An idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious.
An idea that we seek everywhere and is just right in front of us.
Sophie, you are the secret.
An idea that is rational and crazy at the same time. And finally, an idea that is not even an idea, but a mode of thinking, a method.
Do you want to know what it is?
We're talking about logic. And I'm sure you don't need explaining what logic is, because logic is the definition of straightforwardness, of clarity, of basic common sense. Everybody is in the loop about logic, precisely because logic is a loop. And if you already made up your mind about logic, this video is about changing it.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
But changing your mind is never easy, I know, because you've made up your mind, right? You've worked hard on it, on making it, on building it, and maybe even defending it. And then someone comes along and says, I'm here to change it. Not just tweak it or adjust it, but replace it entirely. So you have your old mind here, and then it has to be replaced by a new one. You have to throw away the old mind and then keep the new. There are also risks involved in changing your mind, because in the process of changing it, well, you kind of have to be out of your mind. You might lose it in the process, and there's no guarantee that you'll get your old one back. But that's exactly how we need to approach understanding logic. It's not by making up our minds, but by getting out of it. And I understand that such a claim would meet some resistance.
We're twins.
That's right.
You're fired.
You have no respect for logic.
Let's begin with what we mean by logic. It comes from the Greek word logos, the one we find at the end of almost all of the sciences, from biology to archaeology or sociology, even technology. In Greek, it meant the word, or a reasonable word, an orderly word, the word that puts things in order. So a biologist finds order in life, bios, and a sociology seeks order in society. And even the disciplines that don't end in logy, like mathematics or physics, still seek logic in whatever they're doing. Here's the problem. Biologists don't explain logic. They explain life, or bios. Sociologists don't explain logic. They explain society. No one really studies logic as you would study any other subject. So who then can explain logic? It's not the one who uses it as a tool for something, but simply the one who loves it. And when you love something, you don't use it as a tool, but you just stay with it. And the one who loves logic and language is the philologist. When I wrote this little book on language, I discovered a love for language, for logos, for its own sake. It's a strange kind of love, because logic lives its own life. The moment you try to use it as a tool to put it in some kind of practical use, the love is gone. You know, love is generally impractical. In this video, I'll try to share some of that love for logic for its own sake. Because when you try to understand logic purely as logic, we're not meant to be getting anywhere with it. We're just meant to spin with it in a circle, in a strange kind of loop. The truth is, most sciences don't really love logic. They use it. They apply it as a tool without stopping to explain it. Take this biologist, for example. He's getting away with logic in his briefcase, using it to make sense of life, of bios, without ever opening it up. He's not being dishonest. He's just in a hurry to explain life. But that very briefcase, the logic he carries, is the order he depends on. You see, logic is always used in order to achieve some understanding in whatever subject we're studying. And that's where logic hides, in order to. We use that phrase all the time, in order to, but without ever asking, what kind of order are we even talking about? All sciences ride the logic train. Psychologists dig into the psyche, but leave the logic of analysis untouched. Sociologists dissect society, but not the structure of their own reasoning. They all hop on board, but no one looks down at the tracks. No one is asking who laid these rails. They take logic for granted, not realizing it's logic that is taking them for a ride. I'm not saying these sciences are wrong or that we don't need them. We absolutely do. But the philologist approaches logic not as a tool, but as a love. And love, as we know, is much harder to teach than any theory about it. That's what makes the philologist's task so difficult and so strange, because trying to explain language by means of language is like trying to bite your own teeth or trying to see your own eyes. It's impossible, it's useless, and it's crazy. But to see how your mind works, you have to step out of your mind, and that is the way to understand logic.
But is that logical? Surely we must.
Logic. Logic is the beginning of wisdom, Valeris, not the end.
And the first crazy thing about logic is that to understand logic, you already need logic. We've got biology departments, sociology departments, but no one has ever seen a logology department, because that would just mean repeating ourselves. And repeating ourselves is called a tautology. But no one has ever said that a tautology is a science, let alone a serious one. It's just a red flag. Literally, just try typing the same word twice in Word, and even your spell check thinks you're not going anywhere with this. But we always want to get somewhere, don't we? Getting somewhere is the definition of understanding. We're saying things like, where are we getting with this? Where is this all going? That's why we have sciences. They're getting us somewhere. They're getting us to some kind of understanding of how things work. But with logic itself, the logic of logic, we're not getting anywhere. We're staying. We're staying logical. We spin in a cycle of tautology without getting anywhere. The only place we're going in understanding logic is going crazy.
Sometimes we can't do what feels good. We have to do what is logical.
Even the slightest hint that we're not getting anywhere, that we're spinning in a cycle of tautology, will meet some kind of an annoyance and a resistance. We call such people crazy. In German, the word verrückt means a person twisted towards one's back, a contradiction in person. And English is not far off. Crazy means cracked, broken. Circularity is so much tied to craziness, madness, or to use a more technical term, fallacy, that if you go into the Wikipedia page of circular reasoning, you'll find this following text. Circular reasoning is described as a logical fallacy in which the reasoner begins with what they're trying to end with. And then the next phrase, circular reasoning is not a former logical fallacy. So is it a fallacy or not? The very word fallacy already tells us what we're so afraid of, falling into a circle. But don't worry, we're just falling in love. Sciences aren't allowed to get away with contradictions because that would mean error. But there are some people that can get away with it, and not just get away with it, but build on it. Those are the real logicians, the ones who deal with logos, with language and nothing but language, the poets. Not just in poetry, but in everyday life, we meet contradictions and paradoxes everywhere. For example, cutting bread with a sharper knife is safer than cutting it with a blunt one. Or drinking a hot beverage on a hot day might actually be cooling you down faster than drinking a cold beer. These things don't seem to make sense, and yet they do. Logic, it seems, twists, turns, it spins us over. In everyday language, we use words that we think mean one thing when they actually mean the exact opposite, like ambition. We hear it and we immediately think of a person climbing a ladder or a staircase somewhere important, someone's getting somewhere, usually in a suit, always a suit. But ambition doesn't mean going up, it means going around, going ambiently in circles. This is not ambition, this is ambition. And it's kind of crazy to think that ambition will get you somewhere by going around in circles, and yet we still do. We also use words together that make no sense by themselves, like further back, upside down, or pretty ugly, or bittersweet. Each of these words cancels the other out. They're opposites. Here's where logic comes in. It makes sense. It doesn't pick a side, it holds the contradiction. So if you've ever looked out at the world and said to yourself, this doesn't make sense, you're probably right. It doesn't, but you do. And that's what logic is in the end, the art of making sense. It doesn't run from contradiction, but toward it. It doesn't help you make up your mind, but keeps you out of it.
You will not follow my precept. How often have I said to you, once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
The problem is that we're naive about language because we're born into it. We never question something which we're born into. And the paradox here is that the least naive people around us are not the adults, but children. And we all know
why.
Well, the Earth goes around, and when it turns a certain amount, the sun shows on the horizon.
Why?
I don't know.
Why?
we adults couldn't care less about language, because why would we? It gets the message across, job done. Why question something we used for questioning? But maybe we should care about language. Not more, but less.
How was I ever supposed to figure all this out?
In logic, less is more, quite literally. Where every other science moves for more data, more knowledge, more information, logic goes the opposite route. It goes for less. It goes backwards. Because remember that with logic, we're not going anywhere. We're staying in the circle. We're staying logical. Let biology, sociology, and psychology move somewhere, get somewhere, but not logic. And yes, that is counterintuitive because we're used to the more. We're used to gathering more information, learning more, going to more lectures, read more books, or watching more YouTube videos like this one. In nearly all human sciences, the more is the better, except logic. There's a reason some thoughts are called meditations, because when you meditate, you're not supposed to think about anything. You're supposed to lessen the noise. Whoever tried meditation will tell you that less is actually harder. We'll never find the logic of logic unless we go for less, unless we stay in the circle, go crazy, go down the rabbit hole, following Alice into the Wonderland. Charles Ludwig Dodgson, a professor of logic and mathematics at Oxford, knew a little girl named Alice Little. Little Alice liked the professor's stories so much that she asked him to write them down for her. And so he did. The story came to be known as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, written under the pen name Lewis Carroll. Despite being known as a children's story, Alice in Wonderland is considered one of the most brilliant books on logic ever written. It became so popular that long before he developed the foundations of modern computers, another logician, the young Alan Turing, would borrow Carroll's books from the library and read them voraciously. Why then would a book on such a serious subject as logic, written by an Oxford professor of mathematics, be supposedly aimed at children? Because it makes perfect sense to dedicate a book about logic to the least naive people around. It's designed to stop children in their tracks before they get away with logic and apply it everywhere they go later in life. It teaches them to play with paradox and contradiction before adults later dismiss them as nonsense.
Well, whoever you are, and whatever you are, absolutely nothing you say makes any sense at all.
Oh, that's the nicest compliment I've ever been paid. There's too much sense in the world for me, in my humble opinion.
Please tell me, young lady, just what is so good about never once being misunderstood. There's far too much accurate communication, and if it continues, I fear for the nation. Nonsense, nonsense, that's what we're terribly short of. Don't you love nonsense?
I'm not really sure what sort of.
We're getting lethargic from aiming at logic. Let's put a stop to that. If you don't love nonsense, I'll knock off your hat.
In the real world, the sane world, where everything strives for more, you won't find a school that teaches less. That kind of school only exists in Wonderland, where with every lesson you learn a little less. And perhaps that's the point, because the word lesson was always meant to lessen. And that is the main lesson of logic. if we really want to get to the bottom of this rabbit hole and to a circle that doesn't get us anywhere but loops on itself endlessly, we'll have to reconsider a phrase you've probably heard of. In the beginning was the Word. Circularly speaking, this might be the most logically constructed sentence ever written, because it's not saying anything. It's not getting us anywhere. It's a statement about itself. It's the rabbit hole that we're looking for, so let's jump right in it. Here again, we run into the same problem of more. We want to ask, tell us more, what word was at the beginning? And the moment we ask that and someone gives us an answer, we already stepped outside of the circle. Now we're getting somewhere, but too far and too fast. Because remember, the lesson of logic is not going for more, but for less. That means the answer must already be inside the circle. And there is a way to find it, not by adding anything, but simply by reordering the words. Instead of in the beginning was the Word, we get in the beginning the Word was. There is our word, the one that was. The word that holds everything together. We didn't even get anywhere, and yet we got our answer. The small, unassuming word was, the past tense of the verb to be, lays the foundation of the circle. In other words, we found that being is the circle. It is the lesson of all lessoning. Because whether we're speaking poetically or scientifically, or simply whether we're speaking at all, nothing can escape this word of all words. Remember Hamlet, who asks to be or not to be by adding, that is the question. Or simply the first question of humankind, why is there anything at all? Those are the fundamental questions because that's the least we can ask. Everything else is more. A biologist or a physicist might ask, why is there a molecule? But they never ask the circular question, why is there being? Why is there is? Those kind of circular questions do not really fit well into the realm of science, where more is clearly more and less is clearly less. As John Ruskin wrote, no weight nor mass nor beauty of execution can outweigh one grain or fragment of thought. That's where the confusion often comes between smaller and less. Physics, for example, wants to find the smallest particle, but that doesn't mean less. It means smaller. Because what is even smaller than the tiniest particle is the word that describes that particle. Nothing can be less than that. Well, actually, there is. And what is even less than any word is the order of words. Words themselves are not interesting. Everybody knows them. It's how we reorder them that is interesting. It's how we put them in order which is interesting. It's how we make sense. Because the point of interest is not in this or that thing or essence. It's what's in between them. And what is in between words is precisely what we find interesting. Because the word interesting itself tells us what is in between essences. Let's run a little experiment. Let's get somewhere. Let's say that in the beginning was not the word, but matter. Now, finally, we can ask, what kind of matter? And just like that, the road opens wide. The questions multiply. What are its properties? Where did it come from? How did it begin? We built colliders to smash it, spaceships to chase it across galaxies. We split atoms, crack nuclei, dig deeper. We go for more, and we go for smaller. But paradoxically, going for smaller doesn't mean less. It still means more. More particles, more questions, like grains of sand slipping through the fingers. We can also get somewhere else. Let's say in the beginning was God. Now again, we step out of the logical loop into theology. We study scriptures, interpret texts, debate doctrines. We ask what kind of God, who's God, how many gods. And once again, the road leads into more, an infinite more. But here's where logic stands apart, because there won't be any more logic or better logic or logic 2.0. Circle doesn't evolve, it revolves. Always the same, never changing. always applied somewhere, but nothing can be added to it. It's from that place of less that all of our more begins, and unless we can speak at all, there's really nothing more to say.
I know my rights. I want my phone call.
Tell me, Mr. Anderson, what good is a phone call if you're unable to speak?
If a phone call is a technological approach to logic, then a simple call, a plain spoken call, is a logical one. And by call I mean exactly that. We call this a table, that cloud a cloud, this thought a thought. Everything around us, physical or abstract, is called, it's summoned, as if we're calling things in our perception, not just the objects around us, but even the things that happen to us, events, memories. That's what we do when we recall them. We bring the past into the present by calling it up, by recalling it. The past is calling us, the future is calling us, and we even speak of a calling in life. And this act of calling through a word is anything but trivial. It's just less than any technology we're used to calling with. The philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote a book with a cheeky title, What is Called Thinking? Cheeky because the answer is already there. Thinking is that which gets called. Calling something isn't just applying labels to it, it's to make sense of it. And speaking of making sense, what do we actually make when we make sense? What is a sense? What is it made of? Nothing but a sensation. To make sense is to make a sensation, to create sensation. Even common sense is not just understanding, but a common sensation, a common feeling. Think of music, for example. Think of dancing. When people move to the same beat, they're in common sense, a shared sensation. The dance floor becomes a time and place where everybody's in the loop. A loop that has nothing to do with rationality and everything to do with feeling. There's very little rationality in dancing or music, but it makes a lot of sense. Common sense isn't rational. It's sensational, quite literally. Because when two people understand each other, they're not sharing particles or molecules. They're sharing something less, a sensation. Here again, we run into the same confusion between smaller and less. We tend to think that communication, that making sense, is about sending particles through the air as if information were floating inside them. But meaning isn't in the air. It's not in the particles. It's in the words. Or better yet, in the space between words. Not the words themselves, but the order of them. A word might just be a puff of air from the lungs, but what makes it meaningful, what makes it sense, is something less than the word. It's how it's ordered, called, summoned. When two people have a real conversation, they step out of their own minds and into something larger, a bigger mind with a capital M. That's why logic can feel so out of mind. It's not about brains, it's about the space between them. We call it connection. Quantum physicists call it entanglement. Here's the most fundamental paradox of logic. What comes first, meaning or the meaning behind the meaning? It's the chicken or egg of language. Because in language we have two ways of looking at the word. There's the word and a word. The word means the idea of wordness itself, while a word is any specific word that belongs to that concept. And here's the problem. The word can never be explained by a word. Let's say I ask you to explain what the word means. You'll have to use other words. You might say a word is a sound, a vibration, an utterance, an articulation, and the list goes on and on. But what you're doing is adding more words, more a words, and you fall again into the trap of more. But the lesser of all words, the word, is still more important than any other word, because the word is a concept, not an instance. It represents the order behind all the others, the structure by which all words hang together. We have a simple formula for that. We simply call it in other words. What we're always doing with the word is simply reordering it in other words. And just like that, we always fall into the trap of more and miss the main lesson of logic, where the concept and the order comes first. But the word is more than all of those. And more importantly, it's none of them. A word is not a vibration. A word is not an articulation. A word is not a signal. Those are just more words. So, what's the best word to describe the word? Well, the word. And we're back at square one, or rather back in the circle. We didn't get anywhere, because saying the word is the word isn't saying much, is it? Exactly. But maybe we should care about language. Not more, but less. And if I were to found a school of logic, let's call it Logology University, it would be full of students who could care less about language. There would be one lesson and one lesson only. And the lesson would be the word is the word. And yes, you'd probably call me crazy for that, wouldn't you? With logic, we're not getting away with it or from it. We're staying logical. You can't get away with more unless you repeat the less, unless you're willing to go crazy in the circles of tautology. But crazy is not the only downside of logic, if you can call it a side. This circle can be annoying, even irritating, especially when you're asked to pick a side, to make up your mind on something. Like on some of life's irrelevant questions, like where we come from. One way or another, we'll have to pick a side on that. 2 teams, 2 stories. Team Darwin says we came from apes. Team Creation says we came from God. Each tries to rule the other out. And here's where logic comes in. Not as a player, but as a referee. The referee doesn't take sides. The referee sets the rules and makes sure the game is played fairly. It's not about who wins, it's about how the game is played. The referee of logic has a name in practice. We call it dialogue, the dialogos, a double logos, a double logic, a literal contradiction. But that's the beauty of it. The logos holds the contradiction together. It's not black or white, it's black and white. The 2 teams might want to rule each other out, but you can't rule out the referee, because once the referee is ruled out, the game is over. What started as a war of words turns into something more. Once dialogue is lost, logic leaves the room. And what's left is not conversation anymore, but conflict. That's why logos is not just reason, it's order. It holds the game together.
Order! 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 Order.
In a world where more is considered better and more complete, can you be more complete than complete? Anyways, in a world where going for more is the way to go to get somewhere, going for less is not just counterintuitive, but counterproductive. Especially in our age, the information age, where we produce more data, more knowledge, more information, more words, as if the secret of getting there to that flash of enlightenment is in the more, while forgetting that the real lesson is in the less. The poet Ezra Pound once said that the real mission of a teacher is not to give long lectures, but to save the student's time. And that's what poetry does. It keeps us in the loop of the most important thing, the loop itself. It doesn't explain it, it makes sense of it, creates a feeling for it. That's what the Greek word poesis means. It means to make sense, to make sensations with words. And when it works, even a few lines can open up a new world, like these lines by Emily Dickinson. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. Too bright for unfirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. As lightning to the children eased, with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. In a world of endless content and constant information overload, poetry might seem like a waste of time, but it's actually a massive gain of time, because just in a few lines, it can say more than all the words we've used so far. Take this one line, pure logic wrapped in contradiction. Success in circuit lies. At first, it sounds like a fact that success is found in the circuit. But read it again, and it might mean the circuit itself is lying. And like any fair referee, logic allows both readings. It all depends on what you refer to by the word lies. And that is where logic lies, in the loop. A loop that isn't practical or useful in the usual sense, but one you reach through a kind of detachment, a quiet love that draws you in, like Alice drawn into the rabbit hole. Alice didn't need a reason to fall, she just followed the pool of curiosity. And logic too begins with a fall, a strange turn, crazy enough to become the foundation of all our reason. The word will always be ambitiously sought everywhere, all the time, but always in other words, other languages, and other ways. Always reaching higher, always missing the point. Because the only place to find logic is inside its own circle. A circle of success that never closes because it was never opened. Here success is measured in turning, not in arriving. Each spin asks us to think both ways at once, up and down, beginning and ending, question and answer. Not a straight path, but a loop, a rhythm, a return. And when you stay with the turn, you begin to sense the order. If you want to stay in the loop, please hit the subscribe button. We've got plenty of twists ahead. Make sure to leave a comment below and any words you like, and I'll see you next time.